with us tonight what God has done in your life?
I would love to. Good evening, everyone.
Hey,
How's the
Mick.
R3G family doing?
Excellente, baby.
Gosh, it's been a long time. I was thinking today, it's been a long time since I shared my testimonial, my story. And, to me, it's a big one. And I guess everyone feels the same way because when you go from living life without God and not knowing God to living with, boy, it's a lot different. The challenges and problems don't go away. They're still there, but there's just something about having somebody that's always there 24/7 anytime we need them to talk. It's just something else. And I'll tell you this, community of R3, yeah, we had a lot of success and all that, but it's really changed so many lives in so many other ways, and meaning in the heart and the soul of people. And so I just, I listened to that song at the beginning, and then you and Cheryl, and this morning I was reading this, and I remember Ed, Cheryl, a lot talking about count it all joy as you fall into life's various trials. Count it all joy. And I remember when I was first getting to know Jesus, I'm like, what? Why would I count that all joy? you know? But anyway, we're just blessed to be a part of this group right here. It's pretty incredible. So thanks for having me tonight. And I was thinking, growing up as a young boy, I had a good family life, a mom and dad that loved me and were pretty darn normal. And dad worked. He was a crop duster pilot, and my mom stayed home with us three kids. That was back in the days when you could make just a good living, and mom didn't have to go to work. Nowadays, gosh, both need to work, and kids and childcare and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really different world. But growing up, though, I never, ever heard the word of God. Never. I didn't know anything about God. I knew there was one, but I remember, like, when kids at school might say, "Hey, what church do you go to, Mick?" And, I was just a little tyke. And so I'd come home to mom and dad, and I said, "Hey, the kids asked me what church we go to, and what do I say?" And they said, "Oh, just tell them you believe in God and you're a Protestant." And so that was all I knew. And so that's what I told them. And so then I, grew up and got married the first time, and had one child, and, went out on my own and all that. Still didn't know God, didn't know anything about God. But over the years in my like bass fishing community, I did a lot of bass fishing and stuff. There was a few times in my life where there was a handful of guys, my buddy Tim, Gene, Willie, Oliveira, where they tried to share Jesus with me. And man, I wasn't ready. I didn't understand it. And I just like wanted to run the other way. Matter of fact, I remember one time I went to a business meeting for this company I was working for. And we get to this meeting, and it was supposed to be for the whole staff, all the reps, everyone was supposed to be there. Well, me and one other guy, Gene, we got our dates wrong. And so we show up, and we're in this conference room that was supposed to have 20 people in there. And it was just Gene and I. And I'm like, well, I guess, we got our wires crossed or whatever. I'm out of here, man. I started to walk for the door, and he goes, "Wait a minute, Mick." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Come here, sit down for a second." And he started to tell me about Jesus. And man, I was so uncomfortable. I was like thinking, how can I just get up and get out that door? I am not liking what I'm feeling, man. I just wasn't ready. And I finally weaseled my way out of there, and got out the door and got in my truck. I was like, whoo, man, I'm glad I got away from whatever that was. And drove back home. And so there was one time, and then a couple of my other buddies, just casually sharing Jesus with me. And I was never ready. And the first time I really like felt something, and I was like, whoa, was and Alan, you were there, and so was Charlie. We went on a cruise with the Monavie company called, I forget what they called it, but it was when it very, very, very first started. Like Vicky and I were at a low level, but back then when it first started, if you did anything, you got to go on the cruise because the company was just trying to get off the ground and all that. And so anyway, we ended up on this cruise ship, and I didn't even know Brig then. I knew his name, but I didn't know him. I didn't know what he was all about or anything like that. And we had this little meeting on that cruise ship, and it was in the front of the cruise ship. And I can still remember, it was like green velour couches and chairs and these like gold poles, and just really like kind of cheesy, like a casino or something in the front of this cruise ship. And there wasn't too many of us in there. It was small, but they said, hey, we're going to have a meeting, a leadership meeting. And I was like, wow, I get to go to a leadership meeting. This is cool. This old boat mechanic ain't never been to any leadership meetings. So I was excited, and we get in there and we all sit down, and the guy Dallin started talking and saying a few things. And then he brought Brig up. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm going to learn some stuff right here. And Brig, he didn't talk about the company, he talked about Jesus. And I was sitting next to Vicky, and man, I was getting so like uneasy, and then all of a sudden I got this big knot in my throat, and I felt like I wanted to cry. And I just kept fighting it off, and then the thing ended, and man, I like ran for the door. I'm like, I don't know what that was, but I'm glad it's over. And so then we had the rest of the cruise, and it was all good. So that was the first time like it did something in me when Brig's words were coming out. I was like, I had these feelings. Like Vicky even noticed. She goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just trying to act tough, you know." So then life goes on, and we do our thing, and then there's another event coming up about a year later, I think it was. It was in Tampa, Florida, and it was at a church called the River, and the pastor's Rodney Howard Brown. Um, and so we go to this meeting, and it was when this girl, Holly Roush, she had just won something. I can't remember what it was, but Holly Rouse just had some like award for hitting some rank. And I think Brig and Lita, I think, got their first free Mercedes. But anyway, we're at this event, and I'm like, I flew from California to Florida, and I was broke. We were just getting started. I didn't know what I was doing, but I remember telling Vicky, I said, you know what? That Brig guy's going to be there again, and I think he knows how to do this. Like, let me just go to that event, Vicky. Let me go, and if after that, if it doesn't work out, we'll just throw in the towel on this thing and quit wasting our time and all that. So we get to that event, and it's in a church, but it's a business meeting. And so they're awarding people, and people are saying, how they're succeeding. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. I'm starting to get it, and I'm taking notes. I got my notepad out. I'm like, I'm going to do this thing, man. If these people can, so can I. So my belief was going up. And then pretty soon, here comes Brig, and he gets up there. And man, I just lean in because I'm like, oh, I'm going to get the really good stuff now, how to do this from this guy. And so Brig, he said a few words, and then he went right into talking about Jesus and how Jesus changed his life. And man, I'll tell you what, guys and gals, I like started to just like melt. Like I started to just like well up. where I couldn't hold it back. But then he went back to teaching. He got on the whiteboard and he's like, one right, one left on auto ship 2020. And then I was like, whew, okay, dodged her again, leaned in, started taking notes. I'm like, this is what I came to Tampa for. This is why I flew halfway across or all the way across the country. But then he went back to sharing Jesus. And man, it didn't take another 60 seconds. And I just started bawling in front of 700 people that I didn't know. I'm sitting there and I couldn't stop. Like I couldn't control it. God, it's getting me choked up right now. I couldn't control it. And finally I just gave up, man. And I just bawled until I couldn't cry anymore. And he finished up, and luckily the people sitting right next to me were named Don and Joan Cardoza, some friends of mine. At the time they really weren't. We were just kind of getting to know each other. They were local in California where I lived, and they said, we're going to fly out there too. And they said, Mick, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't know. And they were both believers, and they started like talking to me and loving on me, and they said, you're going to be okay, everything's be all right. Well, after the event, Brig got with them and few other people. Some of you were probably in the huddle. Well, we went out like in the parking lot at the church, and that's when I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And it was probably the most emotional day of my entire life. Like, I can't even describe what I felt and what happened. And I was so like, just, I don't know, in awe of all this. And I didn't really understand it all. And so anyway, we go back to the room that night, and I was rooming with this guy, Jim, from Sacramento. And I was like physically, mentally like spent. Like I was just laying on the bed, like I couldn't even hardly talk, because just of all that happened. Not bad. I just let out years of whatever I'd been holding in, and fighting against and trying to figure it out on my own. And Jim and I were laying there talking, and this is how quickly God worked. We're laying there talking, and I said, I always thought people just like, went for Jesus when they were like down in the gutter at the end of their rope and they had nothing left, and that was their last choice. I said, that's kind of what I always thought. And I said, but man, my life's pretty good. I just married a beautiful woman, Vicky. I mean, life is pretty good. Like, I'm not sure why all that happened. He goes, you mean there's nothing in your life, Mick, that you wish was better? And I said, well, yeah. I said, I went through a terrible divorce with my first wife, and deep scars. It was an ugly, bitter, yucky divorce. And I wasn't fully over that. And we have a daughter, Sarah. And I said, Sarah's back with her mom now. And the one thing I wish is that I had a better communication and relationship with my daughter, Sarah, but it's kind of a weird deal because of the divorce, and she's with her mom now and all these things. And I said, I haven't talked to her in like, I don't know, 4 months. I haven't even talked to my daughter. And I am not kidding. I'm laying there, told him that, and it wasn't 10 minutes. We're still talking, and my phone rang, and it was my daughter. And I hadn't talked to her in months. And I was just like, I couldn't even believe it. And I said, hello. And I said, everything okay? And she goes, yeah, Dad, we haven't talked in a long time, and I was just calling to say hi and see if you're okay. And I was so floored, like I couldn't even believe that happened. And that kind of just started this chain of events, because later that night we had to go to this dinner after the event. And so we're at the dinner, and then Vicky calls me and she goes, "Hey, how's it going over there at that event? You learning anything?" Because that was the only reason I went, and I got all choked up and I couldn't really reply to her. And I started like trying to talk, but I started crying, and her mind, you know, started thinking, "Oh my gosh, he like found some woman there. We're going to get a divorce now." She started thinking all these things, and I finally regained my composure, and I'm like, honey, I accepted Jesus Christ today. And then the phone just went silent. There was nothing. I'm like, "Are you still there?" And she's like, "Yes." Because remember, she knew nothing either about Jesus. And so she started feeling very like insecure, and like, I was this different guy now that what she married, and all these things. And it was just a really weird deal, man. It was a weird thing going on. And so anyway, the next morning I get on the airplane, and Dawn and Joan that were sitting by me in the vent are on my flight. And we were getting off the flight back in Fresno, and they're like, "Hey, Mick, we've been believers for 30 years, and we want to give you something that's going to help you to kind of understand what happened this weekend with you." And so they gave me a copy of The Purpose Driven Life. Joan had it in her carrying case, and it was her copy, but she gave it to me, and she goes, "I want you to start reading this, and it's going to kind of help you understand what's going on right now." And I said, "Oh my gosh, thank you." And so I took it home, and I got home really late, and Vicky was already in bed asleep. And so I just went to bed. Well, it was weird. She woke up but didn't really say anything. It was a very tense situation. And so the next morning, she woke up before me and left and went to the gym. And so I got up, and I'm like, "Gosh, how are we going to like talk about this and stuff? I don't even really know what's going on yet." And anyway, she comes home from the gym, and she's carrying a bag, like she went shopping, got something. And she goes, "Can we talk?" And I said, "Yes, please." And we sat down on the couch, and she said, "You know what? I had some bad experiences when I was younger with church, and some things that happened, and people just, telling me that if I didn't do XYZ, I was going to hell, and just being really like direct and like not loving at all. Just, and they made me feel terrible, and I never wanted to go again. But because of what happened to you, I think I do with you. I want to learn together about God." And she goes, "So I went by the bookstore on the way home and grabbed this book to help me kind of learn." And she pulls the book out of the bag. This is without ever knowing what Dawn and Joan had given me. And she pulls out The Purpose Driven Life. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." God is just like orchestrating this whole thing. And so we started reading the Purpose Driven Life together. And it was a really good book. And to read it together and talk about it, it really gave us a good foundation to get started on our walk with God. And that was March 4th of 2006 in Tampa, Florida. So that was, gosh, 17 years ago. 17 years ago, I got saved. And just because of being in this organization and doing all the events, I've had the opportunity to share and lead other people to Christ. And I think today, especially in the times we're living in, it's the most important thing that we share Christ with people and our children, and keep them, rooted in the Word of God. Because we've had a crazy life, already living through what we've lived through. But can you imagine a brand new baby being born today and what they've got to go live through now ahead? Without God, I mean, who could even attempt it? You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for a God that loves us no matter what. And, I fall short of the mark every single day, but I do wake up every day thanking God for another day and another chance and for forgiving me and just trying to do my best. And I think that's all we can do. And this group right here helps us to stay on the tracks. It really does, man. It really does. And this might be a simple devotional, but I've been reading this every year for 15 years over and over. And this brings so much into my life, just this one page a day, because, I'm one of those guys, I'm intimidated by the Bible. I try to read it and my head wants to just explode. Like I'm better at listening audio and trying to read it and decipher it. But it might not be much, but it is to me. It keeps me connected to God. So anyway, thanks for letting me share tonight. And I've really enjoyed, hearing everyone else, and all your testimonials have just really touched my heart. And man, let's keep them going. Cheryl,